You know, you hear all the time on this radio station about Camp Kupugani. It is an organization that wants to instill certain values, not religious values, not political values, but a certain kind of openness, a certain kind of equity. And they work very hard to make sure that their students don't just have a good time, but that they really learn about society as well as having fun and being outside. I thought it would be interesting to find out a little bit more about who they are, who their campers are, and what kind of programs they have. So we asked Kevin Gordon, who owns Camp Kupugani, to join us and answer some of our questions. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Well, you know, I feel like I should know more about Camp Kupugani. I've been talking about it for years. When did you start this Camp Kupugani?
We started 17 years ago.
Wow.
Our child is the same age, so that's a challenge.
So at the time you started it, did you consciously design a program that was going to be more than just making friendship bracelets and canoeing?
Yes, we're pretty intentional about it because it began as sort of reaction. My first interactions with camping was just being a tennis pro at a very very homogenous, non-intentional camp in Wisconsin. And I was still, even with that, I was blown away by the impact of camp. So my reaction to seeing that was like, wow, suppose you could do this, but have intentionally bring different people together and be more mindful of, you know, kind of the lessons and the openness that we wanted to have. So that was where the idea first spawned, and then took a minute to get to it. But then, yeah, that was always the goal from when we started camp.
Who are your campers and where do they come from and what are their ages and backgrounds?
Say about 50% come from either Chicago or Chicagoland, like suburbs, towns, cities, etc. About 50% are from different states or regions. It used to be more international, but we're still figuring out, or international campers are still figuring out pandemic life going forward.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been a thing for the last year or two. Our kind of ethnic breakdown, we have probably about 40-50% are kind of white or Caucasian, about 30% are Black or African American. My math is not going to add up here. About 15 to 20% Latino, Latina, Hispanic identifying. Yeah, that's 100 already. And then I'd say Asian about 10%. So it's a nice mix of kids, and it's, you know, we try to be, you know, a version of the world that we want to see, that you see people have on, you know, their brochures and stuff, but we're actually trying to live it in real time. So
that raises an interesting point. How big is the camp? How many campers do you usually have? And do they stay for a week or 2 weeks? How does it work?
Most of our campers come for 2-week sessions. So we have two 2-week blended sessions where different genders are there at the same time, and then we have a 2-week girls only session. And about 70% of the campers come for a single session. About 30% come for multiple sessions. Oops, I forgot what the other part of the question was.
Well, that's a good enough answer. I'm curious, though. I mean, most people think of camp, particularly summer camp, as being outside and learning how to swim or how to play badminton. How do you integrate what the normal things people expect with the mission that you're trying to accomplish?
So that's part. So they do get to do all those things. So you get to, play mud volleyball, and dam jumping, and rock climbing, and swimming, and all that. Because my kind of thought or vision as, youth, I guess a youth professional, is that it's always better to, I think of it as like vegetables with like butter and sauteed and whatever, and delicious. So it's good for you, but you don't even realize, like, wow, I was getting all those nutrients and didn't know.
Yeah, like those waffles that you can buy that have broccoli and carrots embedded in them somewhere mysteriously.
Right. Like, what did I just have? I'm like, oh, I'm nutritious and satisfied. So the idea is, like, when you can have fun and, you're learning these lessons and valuable tools, like, without even knowing it, to me, that's like the best way of, child development or really human development. Because, like, if you're learning something and you're having fun as a human, the world's already a better place in an easier way. That said, it's challenging because anytime you're bringing together difference, whether it's like external things or internal things or whatever, it's like you have to, you have to have those tools with conflict resolution and how to be mindful of others and how to treat others, properly and respectfully, even if you are disagreeing with, X, Y, and Z that isn't in your life, but it is in someone else's.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because so many camps do tend to be kind of homogenous. It's a camp designed for X kind of child. And so there aren't those situations where conflict could arise. But when you have people with all different kinds of backgrounds and all different kinds of ethnicities, there is certainly a much greater likelihood that there will be some conflict. How do you guys handle that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're very transparent about all the things. So when we, on our website and when we're talking to parents, they're like, yeah, camp is fun. And, in my mind, a great camp experience, you should cry at least once. Because you're stretching yourself in whatever way. So it could be, it could be a physical challenge. And like, oh, I'm doing this and I never thought I could do that. Like whether it's rock climbing or dam jumping, or it's, wow, I am getting along with somebody who is so different from me, and I'm employing these conflict resolution tools, and it's hard because you're using those muscles that, you're not having to use in school, for example, or on the baseball team. So it can be a challenge. Like we always tell our staff members that, it's one thing to be a great staff member at just a regular, so-called traditional camp, because you have to be a great, mentor, whatever person. The additional layer of challenge is that, yes, that at our camp, plus, we're poking the bear. It's like, okay, that's getting along, and let's layer onto that, like what you're doing with areas of difference, or when you're bringing up topics or challenges that can be uncomfortable.
So I guess that's my other question about how this works. I mean, you've said there are a lot of the traditional sort of camping experiences one would expect, rock climbing at all. But do you also, how do you talk about the social issues? I mean, do you just wait till it arises organically? Are there meetings around the campfire where, you say, like, let's talk about this? How does the socially progressive part of the program work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting as we've evolved over the years. So when we first started in like year 1 and year 2 and year 3 and whatever, we were super mindful of like, okay, let's program this. So we're going to have this campfire exactly about this, and these cabin activities are going to theme around this. And it was good and effective. And then every year, like as we get feedback and as we do the things, we realize like the most impactful stuff just happens. By design, so we're intentionally, making sure that the groups are diverse and all that. But a lot of the valuable conversation and stuff happen, at cabin time and in unstructured time and what we call like free to learn, or at the table, at the dining table. So a lot of that is, there's some curricular type stuff, but a lot of it is just, giving staff and campers like the tools to have like good, either facilitated or just safe discussions about things more organically. So now it's kind of a combination of both, but we find a lot of the powerful moments just come from like, you're just hanging out in your cabin with, so-and-so. And for me, like one of the most valuable things, like there's this one group of campers, oh gosh, they're probably like 18 or 19, 20 now. And when they first came to camp, there's 0% chance. Like one was like a Hindu background, one was a Jewish girl, one was a white girl, one was a black girl. And there's 0% chance that they ever would have connected in the outside world, outside of camp. And then from that first summer, like in the winter, I'd get this phone call at some random time with giggling at the time, giggling 14-year-olds. They're like, oh, Kevin, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, y'all are having a sleepover outside of camp again, huh? That's great. And then I think now even 2 of them are going to the same school, and the other 2 like still connect with them. So it's really kind of magical when you see the outcome of that, the intentionality around bringing people together, because it can happen. We don't have to be a world where we're at each other's throats all the time. We can connect and live that Benetton ad, if anyone remembers what those looked like.
Yeah. Kevin, we need to take a real quick break. I'm talking to Kevin Gordon, who's the owner of Camp Kupugani. We are going to be back with more right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Here on WCPT, you hear all the time about Camp Kupugani, a camp that not only exposes kids to the usual fun stuff that they do at camp, but also it comes with an intention to make sure that the campers learn to get along with a real diverse group of people. And, one of the things that occurs to me, Kevin Gordon is the owner of Camp Kupugani. I would think that the kids who most need this kind of experience probably are the least likely to get a chance to do it. I'm thinking of the kids who grow up in families that are deeply racist or deeply homophobic and are indoctrinated with those kinds of beliefs. I know that you guys do some recruitment. How do you look for kids? And is there a way to reach kids whose families might see your advertising and go, oh, no, I don't want my kid to go away with that liberal nonsense?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like it's a challenge because, like, to me, my ideal camper demographic would include, like everyone, like super conservative. I don't know, have a Confederate flag, like do like whatever. Because, like, to me, like the only way to learn about others is kind of that real direct exposure. So the challenge is like we're pretty much not going to get those families because they're not going to find us because they're likely not engaged with WCPT. they're not necessarily looking for a camp. Well, they might not be looking for a camp, period, but a camp that's open to diverse populations. Kind of all that said, we do try to. We've tried to have local outreach with because we're mostly in a rural majority white. Not majority conservative, but relatively conservative, greater kind of camp region. So we tried to have full camperships available on teacher recommendations. So we're trying that again. So that kind of incorporates a little bit of that. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge because like the kids and the campers can't get to camp by themselves. So you're going to get there. They're not going to hear of camp by themselves. So generally it's going to be a parent or, occasionally a teacher that's going to be able to do that. But my ideal was, we did have once, we had a local a regional family, and mom came to camp, and we had our Kupugani flag on the flagpole. And she was upset because it wasn't, it wasn't an American flag or this, and saying it's disrespecting this or that. So I was explaining, like, hey, we're about appreciating, developing everyone. So that was an interesting outtake, but it was great to have her daughter.
What does the Kupugani flag look like, and what parts of it did she object to?
I think she just, so the flag is just, it's our logo, so it's like multicolored, children just jumping and raising their hands together. So I think she was more, her objection was that it was not an American flag, I believe. Which would be odd because I'm not American anyway. So we might have a Canadian flag or maybe a Jamaican flag up there as well. But it's ironic because we have these couple trees at camp that have all of these directional flags that represent staff and campers who have come to camp. So there's, probably like a 70 to 100 flags. And that to me is what we want. So to object that there wasn't a large American flag on the flagpole was interesting to me.
That is interesting. What other interactions with students or parents have you had over the years that surprised you or maybe pleased you?
I would say one example of maybe both. Maybe not please in the word, but so say when we have campers who have been sheltered. So there was a white camper, a young white camper, she's maybe 8 or 9, and her parents, were super, by the book. How are we creating a multicultural environment for our child? Whether these books going up, we're doing they're checking all the boxes. And then, they do not live in they live in a relatively homogenous community, but other than that, they're doing it. And they were like, okay, we'll send her to this multicultural camp too. Yay, check. And combine that with so we had, a good critical mass of Black or African American campers who there's a range of comfort with the use of the N-word. For some people, it's like, I'm using that because you're my best friend in a very casual way. Other families are like, no, you can never use this word ever in history. That's terrible. And so it was an interesting development because this white child who had no experience with, befriending anyone of color, was experimenting a little bit in, a fair way because, if people are saying, you can't say that word, how does she know? She's never had a real world encounter with it. So that was an interesting development. And so the African American kids who were impacted by it, I'm talking to them like, whoa, this is a real opportunity to help this child. Not that the obligation should be on you as a Black or an African American after teacher, whatever, but kind of it is at the same. At Kupugani, it kind of is because that's our. This is an opportunity. Do we want this child to go through her life being ignorant, or do we want an opportunity to, kind of help chart a different path? So that's an interesting. So after that, then we kind of had to curricularize a little bit stuff around the N-word. So in subsequent sessions, we're like, okay, here are some basic rules around it, because, and then going from there. But by and large, we try not to have any zero tolerance. I mean, aside from safety, aside from obvious safety, whatever. Because anytime I hear zero tolerance, I'm like, how are we growing from whatever we're not tolerating? How do we get to a better place of growth and development and moving together if we're not willing to listen and hear what other people are saying that might be contrary to what we think or believe?
You did make reference just now and earlier to the fact that while most of this sort of growth takes place kind of spontaneously, there is some curriculum. How does that fit into the program? What shape does that take?
We have, so over the course of 2 weeks, we have 4, we call them modules, and they're 2 or 3 days each, 2 to 4 days in length. One of them is always conflict resolution, and one of them is always diversity. So kind of within those days, whether it's an evening activity or cabin activity, when there are programmed things, they're around those themes. So conflict resolution, diversity are always a thing every session. And then there's a rotating kind of 3-year basis of other things. So one of them is like money, it's not money management, but fiscal responsibility, leadership development, artistic creativity, et cetera. So there's 12 total that kind of get rotated in. So over the course of, if a camper is returning to camp for 3 years, they won't repeat a module except for the conflict resolution and the diversity.
Well, since I have you here and we have an audience that's listening to this, give us some conflict resolution advice.
The easiest to say and not necessarily to do is just, number one, just be quiet. Listen. So listen and truly hear what the other, what the other person is saying. Repeat it back so that they, take turns, repeat back. So you're actually hearing and understanding and what the other person is saying. And then we're huge on I statements, because if you use an I statement, you can't possibly offend anybody. Because when you use a true I statement, so it's like, I feel such a way when such a thing happens because of this, and therefore I'd like to see this. You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
You have to be careful because there are the fake I statements, which are really you statements in disguise. So it's I feel, attacked when Joan says such leading questions. That's not an I statement at all. That's a fake I statement. But when you're saying what your feelings are, so I feel nervous when I'm on the radio. And therefore, next time I would like, to be organized and which actually are all things that happen, and I appreciate that.
You weren't a therapist in a previous life, were you?
Not even. I was a psych major in college, only because that was the easiest major I could find.
Well, because those are two big tenets of therapy when trying to get two people to talk to one another. You don't say you're a jerk. You say I feel this way, and and the reflection. What I hear you saying. What I hear you saying, Kevin, is that you would like me to be more open. Those are like the two big bases for any kind of real communication and real understanding between people. And I think that, gosh, in 17 years, how many kids have come through the camp? Do you have any idea?
Getting towards 2,000.
Wow. Amazing. It must give you such a feeling of accomplishment, Kevin.
Yeah, it's exciting because like when he talked about the therapy part of it, just seeing like when you actually have two kids actually engage in real conflict resolution, where you see them step outside the cabin and having this conversation and looking each other in the eyes, you're like, wow, really?
Yeah. Amazing. Kevin, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your continuing support of WCPT because, we're all about the mission you have at Camp Kupugani. Kevin Gordon is the owner of Camp Kupugani. And Kevin, thank you for spending time with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me and have a fantastic rest of your day.
You too.